Hey everyone, thank you very much for joining us. Happy Leap Day to you. Very much welcome you to the latest Lightcast webinar where we'll be diving into the exciting topic of digital skills and our work to understand digital skills trends as we head through 2024. I am delighted to be joined by Elena Magrini. Hello, Elena. How are you?
Hi, Andy.
Good. Well, welcome. Eleanor leads our research in the global team. I run the global team in our work at Lightcast internationally outside of North America. And Eleanor has been working hard on bringing some exciting insights about digital skills in the labor market to us. And in today's webinar, we will dive into some of the headlines and point you towards some resources that we're excited to share with you. But before we get into the exciting topic, just a quick intro. If you are new to Lightcast, a little intro to who we are. So first of all, you are very welcome. Thanks for joining us. Our mission at Lightcast is to unlock new possibilities in the labor market, and it's our firm view that as we navigate, all of us navigate through an ever more complicated, complex, and dynamic labor market, it's really critical for us to unlock new possibilities. We have to understand what those possibilities are, but also navigate our way through some of the emergent challenges. And so at Lightcast, well, we fulfill our mission by really trying to illuminate what's actually happening in the labor market. And we bring that insight about labor markets to a whole range of different customers to help them and yourselves as agents of change in the labor market really have a true impact in navigating your communities through the ever-changing times, working across education providers, thinking about how we can continue to strengthen the connection and alignment between the education provision and employer demand, working with regions and governments as that data informs policy and major investment choices, and working with companies and enterprises right around the world to better understand their own labor markets and talent pools, but also understand where the supply of the skills that they are seeking can be found in the wider labor market. And we do this through the wonderful lens of data, labor market data. We're very excited by labor market data, and I hope you find it as just as exciting as well. So we pull together a range of sources of information, ranging from official government statistics that help us understand the building blocks of labor markets and how they're changing, through to big data sources on job postings and professional profiles that really help us dive deep into the constituent parts of what's really driving change in the current climate. And we bring that data through a range of services to our customer community through software products, research tools, data integrations, and also our expert economists like Eleanor, who undertake research reports on behalf of our clients. So our topic today is digital skills. But why are we even thinking about this? Well, I imagine if you found your way to our webinar today, you have an interest and an understanding. But just a few stats that really bring to the fore just why it's so critical to our functioning and evolving labor market. A few examples on there that you're probably quite familiar with, but 70% of businesses are citing lack of digital skills as a major obstacle. Nearly 90% of young people recognize that digital skills are critical to their current and future careers. Um, an example from the APAC region, where nearly 5 trillion is the net economic benefit of digital skills to the economy, with 92% of jobs now requiring at least some form of digital skill. So really what we're saying is digital skills are foundational to our economy. And so we wanted, as part of our mission, to help organizations and individuals unlock new possibilities in the labor market. We wanted to surface some of these that we hope are helpful and interesting, and give you just a small insight as to why having data like this at your fingertips can help you in your important work going forward. So it's at this point we can bring Eleanor into our conversation to just share a little bit about what we are sharing with you today, and also some of the resources as we've dived into producing the Lightcast Digital Skills Outlook for 2024. So, Eleanor, tell us a little bit about this work that you have driven forward before we then dive into a few of the headlines and the interesting insights that you've gleaned.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks for the introduction. I think, as Andy mentioned, digital skills are so important, and everyone probably on this webinar shares our feeling around the importance of digital skills. But the other thing to say about digital skills is not just that they are extremely important in the labor market right now, but they're also one of those areas in the labor market that is changing quite dramatically, and is also changing and reshaping the way of the way that the labor market overall is functioning. And so we thought we wanted to shed light on some of these changes. We wanted to understand what are the skills that are driving these changes, which ones are the ones that are currently most in demand in the labor market, which ones are the ones that are being disruptive, what digital skills are growing the fastest, which ones are emerging, and also insights on the places that are seeing the biggest rise of digital skills. And then from there, we also dig a little bit deeper into the data to try and understand the specific details in which digital skills are impacting different parts of the labor market and specific occupations. And so to do all of this, we focused on insights from 15 different countries in what is a truly global digital skills outlook. So these 15 countries include America and the United States and Canada. They include Australia and New Zealand, and also a selection of European countries, including the UK, and then 10 of the biggest Western European countries, such as France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. So quite a big comprehensive view of the labor market and how is this changing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and explain a little bit how we got to where we got before trying to talk a little bit about the findings of the research. So starting from what data did we use? And this is a really important question because there are a lot of data out there, but sometimes when it comes to skills, it is really hard to understand and capture demand for skills in the labor market using official statistics. So what we did here was to use big data from online job postings to try and capture directly from the source, so directly from employers, the type of skills that they mention when they're trying to recruit for new talents in different roles. We have a library of billions of job postings collecting right across the world in 150 countries, including the 15 countries that we're talking about today. And so we took all these job postings, and then we tried to use a common taxonomy, a common language, to try and understand a little bit more about the skills insights, the skills requirements that employer put in the job postings. And in this particular case, we used our Lightcast skills taxonomies, and I'm going to talk about it in more details in a second. But in very simple terms, think about it as a common language that we use to interpret and give structure to this big amount of data that would otherwise be quite complex to navigate. And from there, by overlaying this big amount of data with this common language, we were then able to draw a number of skills insights, specifically in relation to digital skills. So this gives you a view of what data we used. And then in this next slide, you can see how we actually built the digital skills outlook for 2024. So as I mentioned, we have data and we have the taxonomy, the common language. Starting from the taxonomy, we looked at identifying a number of skills that are directly related to the digital world. So we try to define what digital skills looks like in practice for employers. And within our taxonomy of over 32,000 different skills, we've identified approximately 12,000 skills that are directly or indirectly related to digital. What do I mean by that? I mean directly in terms of employer, for example, mentioning things like this person needs to have digital literacy. They need to be able to use computers. So those are direct phrases that employers can use to outline that they have a digital skills needs. Other ways that employers normally use, which are directly, explicitly mentioning digital skills, are around mentioning specific software and tools that they may be required for a specific position. So that could be, for example, an employer saying that the resource that they're looking to recruit needs to have skills related to knowledge of Excel or Python programming language or Amazon Web Services, and so on and so forth. And then, together with these skills that directly link to digital, we've also included a wider range of skills that per se wouldn't be digital, but they require digital skills in order to be carried out. And so, an example of that could be, for example, forecasting. Most of forecasting modeling today is done via computer, and therefore, in order to be able to do forecasting, you also need to have some sort of digital skills. So we took all these skills and then we searched the job postings for the 15 countries that I mentioned earlier. And we looked for job postings that asked for at least one of these digital skills. Now, job postings can mention many skills. So there could be job postings that ask for 5, 10, 20 digital skills. But we tried to capture anything that had at least one digital skill. And from there, we produced a number of insights looking at different metrics to understand what's happening in the labor market, from skills frequency to growth, as well as location quotients to understand the location, variation in location of digital skills and occupations. Um, so a quite wide range of metrics that we used. And then last thing to mention in terms of how we built this, we used our data by accessing it through our global API and Snowflake and pulling the insights from there. So that's on the data. And then last one in terms of methodologies, how did we define skills? As I mentioned, the whole process starts from our Lightcast skills taxonomy. And just to give you a little bit more details around the skills taxonomy itself, it's got over 32,000 different skills. So it's a very granular classification that is regularly updated to make sure that we continue to capture new skills emerging in the labor market. And this taxonomy is then organized in a number of categories and subcategories that can help us navigate the meaning behind the specific skills. And I mentioned this because it is relevant for some of the research that we are going to discuss today. And then the other thing to mention is that these skills are also then split into 3 categories, broad categories around common skills, specialized skills, and specific software skills.
Cool, thanks, Ellen. And I should add to this that this is part of our open library, and so there are resources, and I'm sure we can put some link in chat or send it out as part of the follow up to this webinar if you're interested in learning more about that language and bringing that into your own work. If it's relevant, then I would encourage you to go and check that out. You can access the library of skills, which we update on a very regular basis via API, via some little tools and plugins that allow you to explore it. So that's very helpful. And before we start to dive into the juicy stuff, the interesting stuff, I forgot to mention that if you do have any questions as we go, feel free to pop them into the chat function, and some of our robots or minions on the side will do their best to answer as we go, while we focus on the exciting graphs and charts that we're about to dive into there. So, yeah, back to you, Eleanor, to guide us through some of the headline trends.
Okay, here we go. Let's start from the very top. One of the most is actually one of the most googled one of the most Google searched question is what digital skills are most in demand at the moment in the labor market. And so we started from there to try and identify the top 10 in demand digital skills across the 15 countries that we have selected for analysis. And so what you see here on this slide is that on the vertical side, you see the top 20 skills most in demand overall on average across the 15 countries. And then horizontally, you have first the average and then the specific size, so the frequency with which specific skills are being mentioned in labor markets across the world, across the selected countries. And the bigger the bubble size, the more frequently mentioned a skill is. So indicatively, when we're looking at the average, the skills at the top have a bigger bubble size, and then going down the ranking, the size of the bubble shrinks. But if we look at different countries, obviously there are variations, and so sometimes we see bigger bubble size popping up here and there throughout the ranking compared to the average. And that is also one of the key findings of these charts. But before we delve into the differences between different countries, let's first look at overall what are the digital skills most in demand. And what we see there is a combination of basic digital skills and more advanced ones. So we see that the Microsoft Office package is one of the most requested digital skills, as well as its components like Microsoft Excel or PowerPoint. Then we also see as simply mentioning of, for example, computer literacy as a skill that's been most in demand in terms of digital in the labor market. And then we also see a wider range of more advanced digital skills, for example, in relations to computer science, automation, as well as different programming languages. So there's quite a range from the most I'm saying basic, but they're the most widespread in the labor market to some skills that are very specific and very technical on certain parts of the labor market. And then from there, we can also look at the specific picture for each of the country. And here we start to see some variation. So there are some common denominators, some common threads across the countries. Like, for example, in most countries, the Microsoft Office package is in high demand. But then the actual ranking of these 20 skills does vary from one country to another. And that kind of indicates to us that while the demand for digital skills is a global trend, there are very specific nuances in different parts of the labor market that we also need to consider when we are trying to navigate this topic.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And we're going to dive into geography and the geographic nature of digital skills a bit more in due course. But just fascinating to think when it comes to geography. Obviously, if you're within a particular country, if you're joining us from Germany and you have a particular interest in and focus within the German labor market or sub-regions, then looking within a country is interesting. But actually, for a lot of organizations who work and operate globally, understanding how things are trending across regions, not just in terms of the absolute demand for certain skills, but more about how different communities describe different types of skills. So there's obviously many drivers behind this, the makeup of the economy in terms of what industries are driving demand, what job roles, etc. But it fascinating jumps out to me that that top line of Microsoft Office. I'm being really lazy and just starting at the top line, but that top line of Microsoft Office, you've got Austria, Germany, Switzerland, so the DACH countries sort of really kind of clustering around that. Now, does that mean it's more in demand? Microsoft Office is more in demand, or is that just more of a cultural way of describing the sorts of skills that we are seeking.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Andy. And also because one of the things to stress when we use job postings as our source of data is that what we are seeing here is what employers deem so important to explicitly mention in a job posting. So the fact that in some places some skills are explicitly mentioned doesn't mean that they're not important in other parts of the labor market. It may mean that some other parts of the labor market are more advanced in the development of that skills, for example, and so that skills have become so ubiquitous that employers don't mention it in the labor market anymore. Or it could be that it is less important because of a different composition. So these are all things that you understand a little bit better once you dig deeper into the data and you try to get into the nitty gritty of what's behind these high level findings.
Let's get digging.
Keep digging. So, second thing we looked at after the top in demand digital skills, we tried to focus on two different types of digital skills as well. Fastest growing, which is what you see on this slide, and then emerging skills, which is on the next slide. And I'm going to come on into a second. Fastest growing digital skills. What are you looking at here? These are skills that in the last 3 years have grown significantly in the labor market, but these are skills that already have a critical mass. So these aren't small skills that have seen a massive growth because they were coming from a very small basis. These are skills that already had a good chunk number of job postings that required them 3 years ago. And despite already a lot of parts of the labor markets demanding these skills, they have seen a lot of growth. So these are the skills that you should be caring about if you're interested in trying to understand not just the speed of the trend, but also the volume, the number of jobs that these skills are affecting. And what we are seeing here is, again, a mix of skills um, from the wider and more general digital literacy being mentioned in more and more job postings today, to more specific skills like, for example, around Microsoft Teams. 3 years ago, we were just about or just after the pandemic, but wasn't a skill that it was as much used as it is today. And then a number of other skills as well. And this is the picture here is just a snapshot. But then in the Digital Skills Outlook, we also have individual snapshots for each of the countries. And again, once you have access to the tool, you will see that each country sees differences in demand for the top 20 fastest growing digital skills.
We often pick the US as a good example. A big sample size, it's a big economy, but often is where we see some of the kind of the emergent aspects, particularly of the tech labor market. Think Silicon Valley and the broadening of that. So we picked the US as an example to give us to get us started. But obviously, as you say, you'll be able to dig in and look at different countries as well.
Exactly. And then alongside the fastest growing digital skills, we also look at the top 10 emerging skills. So, what's the difference between emerging digital skills and fastest growing digital skills? The metric used behind the calculation, the formula behind it is exactly the same. It's just these are the skills that didn't have a critical mass back to begin with. So these are skills that were very, very small in our data to begin with, but has shoot up massively. And in fact, if you look at the x-axis and the magnitude of some of the growth, it is really huge. And it is huge because it starts from a very small basis. But this is what happened to things like generative AI, for example. It's something that it was very, very small, very, very niche in the labor market a few years ago, and now it's becoming incredibly important, incredibly fast. And so this gives an idea of the skills that could potentially be very disruptive in the labor market in the coming months and years. And again, the US here is taken as an example because it's normally the first country that sees these disruptions before they then apply to other parts of the labor market. But in the Digital Skills Outlook itself, we have the same chart for all the different countries in analysis. Then, so that's what are the skills? What skills are we talking about? What are the skills that are changing the labor market? Then the second part of the outlook focuses on places. Why do we focus on places? Because as the first few charts already hinted, the averages are all well and good, and they are very important and interesting in terms of giving us an overview of how a trend is playing out, but they don't give us granular insights about what is happening in a specific economy. And we know that economies from one place to another are significantly different. They have different industrial composition, they have different level of development, they have different talent pools, and all these things play a role in influencing how digital skills trends and wider trends affect a specific labor market. So what we did here was to look at our 15 countries selected for the analysis, focus on the top 5 metro areas in each country in terms of population size, and then look at the frequency with which digital skills are mentioned in each of these markets. So the way to interpret it, for example, is that if we take Austria, Austria has one city with more than in which more than 50% of job postings mention digital skills. That city is Vienna. And then on the other hand, it has quite a wide gap to before all the other cities in which digital skills appear in job postings in less than 40% of the cases. Then instead you have a place like Italy where it is much further down on the ranking, but the difference between the first city and the last city in the top 5 is much smaller. So that indicates that the differences between one city and another in terms of digital skills in Italy are much smaller compared to, for example, Vienna versus the other cities in Austria.
And the point that you raised earlier that sort of really jumps out here and worth reminding is that this isn't necessarily truly defining the quantifying demand per se. It's looking at relativity within a country and taking those top 5 cities, but also we're seeing some of those trends where maybe in the UK it doesn't necessarily mean that digital skills are in any lesser demand than Canada or Germany, just more that they're not described so readily, because it could be that they're a given, a taken for granted, more ubiquitous skill perhaps. But interesting to see kind of the variation across countries, but probably more interesting actually is thinking within country where that is a standard, is standardized to some extent within the country based on standard ways of communicating job demand. It is interesting to note different cities do have sort of a different profile, and some of that presumably is driven by the underlying sector and industry mix within certain cities, where there might be a stronger tech base where clearly digital skills are going to be of great relative importance versus other industries that maybe have sort of less digital kind of integration, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Andy, because the differences between different industrial makeup of different cities, like the sectoral makeup of different cities, really does play a key role in determining demand for digital skills, and not just demand overall in terms of the frequency, but also in terms of the specific skills, digital skills that are being requested in one place on the other. And so here you see a very high level snapshot of what you'll find on the page, which is a map with all the top 5 cities that we just mentioned. And then if you zoom in on different parts of the map and you scroll to the specific cities, what you find is not just the insights overall in terms of the total number of job postings in that place and the total number of digital postings in that place, but you also find the top 5 skills by location quotient for that place. And so I'm going to pause a second second here to explain what we mean by location quotient. So the location quotient is a measure that we use to try and understand the relative concentration of a skill, in this case, a skill subcategory, relative to other parts of the labor market. So in this on this slide, you see Munich and Geneva, for example, and what the location quotients tell us is relative to the all the cities that we considered as part of this analysis. What are the skills that are more unique to Munich or to Geneva in terms of digital skills? And what we see here is that Munich has more of an engineering and manufacturing type of demand for digital skills. So we're still talking digital skills, but a different subset of digital skills compared to the one that we see, for example, in Geneva, which are instead more focused on finance, for example, with financial trading, data visualization, as well as business intelligence. And so for each of the cities, you can dive into the specifics of it and of the specific element of digital skills that make up that particular labor market. And then it is not just there aren't just differences in terms of regions, but there are differences in demand for digital skills from one occupation to another, and these differences between different occupations are then what shapes the regional differences that we just talked about. So it's basically we are now going one level deeper into the data to try and understand the digital skills profile of a specific occupation. And this is really helpful because if you are a company and you want to understand what are the digital skills that your workers need to have, this is what you need to know about the labor market for that specific occupation. And likewise, if you're trying to develop education provision in relations to application programmers, for example, you need to know the skills profile, not just of all jobs in an economy, but specifically those for applications programmers. And so this is an example of what the digital skills picture of an occupation looks like. And this, the way to interpret this chart is very similar to the very first chart that we saw. So you see on the y-axis the top 20 digital skills mentioned for this occupation on average across the 15 countries that we selected. And then you can see the differences right across different labor markets. Now, the differences here are somewhat smaller in the sense that many jobs are the same job, no matter in which country you are. But there are still cultural differences or differences in which jobs are mentioned in the labor market. But what we are seeing here is that the bubble size are quite big, and there's quite a lot of different digital skills being demanded for application programmers, for example.
Yeah, as you were saying, Eleanor, this is probably where we're going down the funnel of understanding. The earlier analysis was helping us understand the general sense of digital skills, but really the rubber hits the road when we start to get into very specific roles and understanding the different skills profiles. And as you say, a little less variation, therefore, geographically, as we get to sort of standard roles like applications programmers. And it's really at this point we can start to build out a profile of what are employers generally looking for when they're going out to market for application programmers. What are the key skills that those workers or prospective workers need to have to be relevant to the demands of that job? So that really does influence their education development and career planning, as much as thinking about how you build a skills and workforce ecosystem that is meeting ever-changing demands. So if you live in a region where employers are actively seeking for applications programmers, how do you make sure you've got the skills infrastructure, the workforce infrastructure? How do you help those people, prospective workers or those that have those skills, connect to the right opportunities? So this is really where those actual connections calm. And this is where those possibilities can be realized that we talked about earlier.
Yes, and it's not just for application programmers. You can create a similar profile for a lot of different occupations. And we've taken a couple of examples here just to illustrate also how demand for digital skills vary from one type of occupation to another. So we talked about application programmers, which is it's an IT occupation. It's a purely IT occupation. So you would expect it to have high demand for digital skills. But digital skills nowadays are not just a thing for IT occupations anymore. We are actually seeing demand for digital skills right across the labor market, pretty much in every occupation. And so here is a second example. This is graphic designer. I would define this occupation as somewhere in between, in the middle. So it's not an IT occupation by definition, but it is an occupation that would jump out as one that needs digital skills when you think about it. What we see here is that the type of digital skills that are most in demand is different compared to the one that we just saw for applications, the programmers just a second ago. So here we see a lot of Adobe, for example, being in demand, and other skills related to what a graphic designer would do and would require in terms of digital knowledge. And then the other things to say for this slide compared to the other one is that you probably already noticed that the size of the bubble is a little bit smaller. So this is because this is not a purely IT occupation, and therefore the frequency with which digital skills are mentioned is on average a little bit lower. And then last but not least, an example for an occupation that is not an IT occupation at all, finance managers. And again, here what we are seeing is that there is still demand for digital skills, even if this role it is not traditionally a digital role, and is actually quite far ahead from being a digital role. And what we are seeing here is that demand for digital skills is particularly focused and concentrated on a few different skills, especially in relation to Excel, Office, but also what I was saying before about forecasting. Finance managers do a lot of forecasting. Forecasting is not necessarily digital skills per se, but nowadays we do need digital tools to be able to carry out these kind of exercises. And then we see that there are a lot of digital skills around other areas that are important to finance, so financial data, financial analysis, and data analysis. But again, with differences across countries.
Yeah, and this is an interesting example as we move from the very obvious technical roles out to the broader labor market. It just reinforces that digital skills are generally found pretty much everywhere in the labor market, but in slightly different forms, different doses. And of course, we're only diving into the specific digital skills that your work's identified, those 12,000 or so of the Lightcast library of over 30,000 skills. So actually, whilst we've not dived into it today, your typical analysis will be thinking about how do those digital skills connect to non-digital skills to build out that holistic view. And we can see, of course, in this example of finance managers and the dots being smaller suggests that there are plenty of other non-digital skills that haven't made it into our 12,000 or so for the study here that will also be making up a big percentage and proportion of the skills. And so digital skills can live on their own, but often they also connect in with a broader set of other skills that employers are seeking.
Yeah, it's not an either or. Digital skills are very high in demand, but that doesn't mean that transferable skills and other technical skills are becoming any less important. If something, some of the most transferable soft people skills are becoming even more important because digital is helping us automate some of the other tasks.
Great. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you taking us through some of those headlines. There's a lot more. I'll point you towards those resources in a moment. But thank you, Eleanor, for picking out those interesting and fascinating trends. And we talked about it a little bit as we went through. But what does it all mean? Why is it so important? Well, if you think about the communities that we work with as Lightcast, and I'm sure represent you as viewers, we're really seeing the world becoming a skills based world. Whether we're thinking about education, yes, of course, historically and currently, qualifications and accreditations are really valuable. But if we think about the building blocks to our education, our world of education, skills development, it really is at that skills level and the combinations thereof. So, as an education provider, understanding not just that digital skills are really critical, but the different types of specific skills that are in demand in different locations, different segments of the economy becomes really practical. And think about building your provision and think about the skills that we need to be developing as an education organization to ensure that the workers of today, as much as the future, are equipped and prepared to access and take advantage of the great opportunities the demand for these skills presents. For regions, very much starting to think in terms of skills-based economies. We are very much seeing governments, regional, small areas, regions, national, and if we think about the year of skills, the EU year of skills last year was really about unpicking the kind of key core trends and think about how do we build productive, effective, inclusive economies that function more effectively. And so understanding the makeup of demand and how we can serve that, but also the talents that we have and in the workforce within our region, and how that is going to be attractive to employers who are seeking those skills as well, for attracting businesses to locate and grow within your regions. And then at the other end of it, of course, there are companies themselves, the consumers of the skills, the ultimate utilizers of the skills, ensuring that companies and businesses who are planning their workforce can understand the skills that are already available within their workforce, but also then thinking about the skills that need to be supplemented and built to help their businesses thrive, and whether that be through um, adding skills into the existing workforce or bringing new workers into the business. And so having the ability to specify, to quantify, to define those capabilities is really critical. And that's where we find information like this hopefully being very helpful to a wide range of organizations, and of course connecting those ecosystems together into what we call the economy. Thank you, Eleanor. Really, really insightful examples. And I'm sure if you haven't already found it, you would want to dig in and sort of have a look for yourself and dive ever deeper behind some of those headline trends. And so we're very excited to release the report. There's a web address. It's quite small on the page, but I'm sure that a link will be forthcoming where you can dive in and actually access the report, dive into some of that data, pull out the specifics that I hope will be helpful to you, and a range of resources that we are building around that. So be sure to check that out for yourself. But we've obviously been looking specifically at digital skills. If you've been watching and following these webinars over time, you'll see that we've done various deep dives over the last year or so into the green economy, labor market, AI specifically, and so on and so forth. So we have a whole wide range of resources on the website. We'd love you to dive into, and particularly, we've showcased Europe quite a lot as we've gone through here. We do have a specific resource that if you are in Europe or interested in understanding what broader skills are driving the European labour market and countries therein, then I wanted to point you towards the European Skills Transformation Index. Ellen and I did some webinars and sessions previously on that, so I'm sure you can find that in the library and the back catalogue, or the on-demand playlist, as it may be. But yeah, a ton of resources. We're really, really passionate about helping helping people, economies, and regions to thrive. And so we hope that showcasing not just the data that we've got, but how you might use it and interpret it and understand it, we hope that's really, really helpful for you. So please do check out these resources. We're delighted to bring some of that information. And of course, behind a lot of this is a lot of data. And so if you feel that whilst these resources are helpful, but don't give you the specific answers that you need, well, that's where we can come in, and our commercial services are aligned there to help you solve real problems in your communities and serve your stakeholders more effectively. And we'd be absolutely delighted to talk to you about how we can help you with your specific needs. So be sure to get in touch. So I think we're coming up just over 45 minutes or so. So that's our allotted time. So I just want to say a big thank you, Eleanor, for the amazing research. I know you put a lot of work into it, and colleagues across Lightcast as well. Thank you very much for joining me just to pick out some of those highlights, help us understand what we're looking at and how we might use it. So I'm very grateful for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us. It's we're we're, as I hope you can tell, we're very passionate about what we do, and of course we are just an enabler. You guys are the ones that make real change in the labor market, and so we're really honored to serve you and to help you be more effective in the work that you're doing in the communities that you're serving. So thank you very much. And as I say, if we haven't been able to have our minions answer questions to the fullest extent in the chat, then we will be sure to follow up, and we will be sending out a recording and a set of slides for you as we go, and some of the links to resources. So thank you very much. Thank you, Eleanor. Till next time, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.